In 2018, Nickelodeon quietly removed a single episode of SpongeBob SquarePants from rotation. No announcement, no explanation. For 3 years, almost nobody noticed it was gone. It is still gone today. That is one episode. There are more. Some were cut after real-world tragedies. Some were buried because the world caught up to them. Some are still airing right now, untouched, even after a decade of fans begging to have them pulled down. And then there are the theories. The ones the show's own writers have confirmed on camera. The ones the network had to publicly deny. The ones built on details Steven Hillenburg refused to explain for his entire life. Every cut, every banned scene, every dark fan theory worth knowing. All of it in one place for the next few hours. Welcome to Cartoonology. Let's get started. Midlife Crustation, the only SpongeBob episode that stays banned. There's exactly one episode of SpongeBob SquarePants that Nickelodeon has buried for good. Out of more than 300 episodes across more than 2 decades, only one has been pulled from television, scrubbed from the streaming service, and left there with no plan to ever bring it back. That episode is Midlife Crustation, the second half of episode 15 from season 3. It first aired on January 24th, 2003. Since 2018, it has been gone. Most people who watched SpongeBob in the early 2000s have seen this episode. Probably more than once. It used to run in normal rotation alongside every other episode from that era, and it ended up on a handful of DVDs and digital collections. For a long time, nobody flagged it as a problem. It was just another episode about Mr. Krabs being weird. Then one day it disappeared, and Nickelodeon refused to talk about it for years. The plot, on the surface, is a Mr. Krabs episode. A song on his clock radio reminds him he is getting old. He drags himself to work. A customer compares him to a dried-out Krabby Patty. Pearl tells him he is old. He overhears the kind of remarks that pile up on a person until they crack. By the time he gets to the Krusty Krab, he is depressed in a way the show rarely lets him be. He is not money angry. He is not yelling at SpongeBob to work faster. He is just sad. He wants to feel young again. So he asks SpongeBob and Patrick if he can come along on their big night out. They say yes, in the way SpongeBob always says yes to everything, with full enthusiasm and no awareness of what is actually being asked. The three of them set off into Bikini Bottom for a wild evening. The wild evening turns out to be playing arcade games with kids, getting ice cream, riding a tiny train at a children's park. Mr. Krabs grows more and more frustrated. None of this is making him feel young. None of it is even making him feel like an adult having fun. It is making him feel like a 50-year-old crab at a daycare. The episode could have ended there. A simple lesson about how chasing youth is a waste of time. SpongeBob and Patrick try their best. Krabs accepts that he is older now. Roll credits. That is not how it ends. Patrick reveals that the real plan, the final stop on the big night out, is something called a panty raid. He explains it to Krabs the way Patrick explains anything, which is to say, without explaining it at all. Krabs gets excited. He has not been excited the whole episode. Suddenly, there is energy in his face again. The three of them sneak through Bikini Bottom in dark clothes. They climb through a window into a stranger's home. They steal a pair of women's underwear from a clothesline inside. They run out laughing. Then, the woman whose home they just broke into appears. It is Mr. Krabs' mother. She is holding her own underwear in her hand. She is furious. She sends her grown adult son to bed without dinner in his old childhood bedroom in the home he grew up in. The episode ends. For about 15 years, nobody at Nickelodeon seemed to see this as a major problem. It aired and re-aired. It went on DVDs. It was watched by millions of children who, depending on their age, either had no idea what a panty raid was or had a vague sense it was something old. It is worth knowing what the term actually means, because the show never quite explains it, and the cultural memory of it has faded almost completely. A panty raid was a college prank from the 1940s through the 1960s, where men would break into women's dorm rooms and steal their underwear. It was treated, at the time, as a harmless campus tradition. By the 1990s, it was already starting to read as gross. By the 2010s, it read very different. By 2018, it read as something nobody at a children's network wanted on the air anymore. That year, Nickelodeon quietly stopped airing the episode. They did not announce it. They did not put out a statement. The episode just stopped showing up in the rotation. Fans who tried to find it on television could not. Fans who tried to find it on official video apps started noticing it was missing there too. The first reporting on the disappearance came in 2021 when journalists asked Nickelodeon what was going on. A spokesperson named David Bittler Writer told the New York Times that the episode had been out of rotation since 2018, following what he called a standards review, in which the network determined some story elements were not appropriate for kids. That was the entire public explanation. A standards review. No mention of the panty raid by name, no mention of the timing, which lined up with the period when major media companies across the country were pulling old content that had aged poorly. The same year Nickelodeon was hiding Midlife Crustation, the company that owns Dr. Seuss was pulling 6 of his books from print for racist imagery. Scholastic was pulling a Captain Underpants spin-off for the same reason. The cultural temperature had shifted. Nickelodeon shifted with it, and they did it without telling anyone. When Viacom CBS launched the Paramount Plus streaming service in 2021, they put almost every episode of SpongeBob on it. The first 12 seasons all loaded up at once. They used the show heavily in their advertising. Every episode was there, except this one. Midlife Crustation was the missing puzzle piece. Amazon Prime Video, which had been carrying the first 6 seasons, also dropped it. For a brief window in July 2023, the episode came back. It was not on purpose. The Paramount Plus channel on Amazon Prime had a technical mistake, and Midlife Crustation appeared on the service for a short time. Fans noticed. Articles got written. Paramount put out a quick statement saying the episode had been posted by accident and would be removed, and within hours, it was gone again. That is the only time it has officially returned to a streaming service since the ban began. A glitch. There is a strange detail in the way Nickelodeon handled the removal. They did not just pull the half episode that contains the panty raid. SpongeBob airs in 11-minute segments, 2 segments per half-hour block. Midlife Crustation was paired in its original airing with another segment called The Great Snail Race. That second episode has nothing wrong with it. It is just a story about SpongeBob training Gary too hard for a snail competition. By all accounts, it is a fine episode. But because of how the original pairing was set up, when Nickelodeon pulled Midlife Crustation, they had to break up The Great Snail Race from its sister episode and pair it with a different one. On most streaming services now, The Great Snail Race shows up next to a different episode entirely, called Gary in Love. The animation styles do not even match between the two. The seams of the cover-up are visible if you know where to look. What makes the ban interesting is what it suggests about everything else SpongeBob got away with. The show has aired episodes where Mr. Krabs scares a tiny enemy into trying to throw himself in front of a bus. It has aired episodes where Squidward sticks his head in an oven as a joke. It has aired an episode where Mr. Krabs gets so angry about a missing dime that he loses his arms in a garbage disposal. It has shown body horror, suicide jokes, animal abuse, and depictions of mental breakdowns so dark that they prompted online petitions with thousands of signatures asking for the episodes to be removed. Those episodes are all still on the air. They are all on Paramount Plus. None of them have been pulled. The one episode Nickelodeon decided crossed a line was the one about a sad old crab going on an underwear heist with 2 cartoon sea creatures. Some fans have argued the network made the wrong call. Writers at outlets like Comic Book Resources and Slate have defended the episode as one of the funnier, more emotionally complex Mr. Krabs stories. They point out that the panty raid is the punchline of the whole episode, not a celebration of the act. Mr. Krabs gets caught. He gets punished. The episode treats his choice as foolish and humiliating. The mother in the story is not a victim played for nothing. She wins. She stands over him with her stolen clothes and sends her own son to bed. The defense is fair, but the network's logic is also clear. SpongeBob airs to children. A whole episode built around the structure of a panty raid, treating it as the exciting climax of a night out, ending on the joke that the target is a relative, is not the kind of thing a major children's network in 2018 wanted to be associated with anymore. The era when that kind of humor flew without comment had ended a few years before the episode itself was pulled. The Me Too movement and the broader public reckoning around how women had been treated in earlier decades had reframed a lot of older content. A network looking at its back catalog was going to find this episode and pause. What is striking, though, is that Nickelodeon never said any of that. They never named the panty raid as the reason. They never explained the timing. They left it as a vague mention of a standards review and walked away. The full explanation has been pieced together by reporters and fans, looking at the dates and at what else was happening in 2018 across the entertainment industry. The episode does still exist in a few places. People who bought DVD collections sections of Season 3 or the From the Beginning Part 2 digital set still have it. Clips of it float around YouTube, sometimes uploaded by fans, sometimes by accounts that get taken down and replaced. The full episode can be purchased on iTunes, but only as part of a larger collection, which is the kind of compromise that lets a company say the episode has not been completely erased, while making it as hard as possible to actually find. The way this kind of removal works, in the long run, is that it tends to deepen the mystery. A generation of kids who watched Midlife Crustation in 2003 and thought of it as just another silly Mr. Krabs episode now find themselves trying to remember it. They search for it. They find threads on forums. They find articles explaining why it is gone. They learn the word panty raid for the first time as adults, because the show that introduced them to the concept never explained it. They watch the clip again, the part where Krabs realizes who lives in the house, and they react to it differently than they did as kids. The episode has become more interesting in its absence than it ever was in rotation. For Nickelodeon, the choice to bury the episode quietly was probably the smart business move. A loud announcement would have created a fight. A removal that nobody noticed for 3 years created almost no friction at all. Most fans never even realized the episode had been pulled until 2021, when reporters started asking about it. By then, the decision was 3 years old and the rotation had moved on. There is one more detail worth knowing. When the Paramount Plus error happened in 2023 and the episode briefly reappeared, the company's statement was specific. They called it an inadvertent posting. They said it had been removed. They did not in any way signal that the ban might be lifted in the future. There has been no announcement since. No reconsideration, no talk of bringing it back with a content warning, the way some other companies have done with old episodes of other shows. The official position is that this episode is not coming back, and the network has stuck to that position for nearly a decade now. Midlife Crustation is, as of today, the only SpongeBob episode that holds that distinction. Every other controversial entry, every other moment fans have begged Nickelodeon to remove, has stayed available. Even the episodes where characters try to harm themselves on screen are one click away on Paramount Plus right now. The panty raid is the line. The panty raid is what Nickelodeon decided was finally too much. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The strange part is that this is not even the most controversial episode of SpongeBob the network has ever aired. It is just the only one they have been willing to admit that, in retrospect, they regret. Other episodes from this same era pushed harder, went darker, scared more children, and triggered louder fan backlash. One in particular sat in a vault for 2 full years before Nickelodeon could figure out how to release it without making things worse. And the reason it was held back had nothing to do with content review and everything to do with the world outside the show suddenly catching up to what was on the screen. Section 2. Quarantined Crab. The episode COVID Banned. In early 2020, Nickelodeon was getting ready to air a brand new episode of SpongeBob SquarePants. It was finished, animated, voiced, scored, ready to go. The title was Quarantined Crab. The plot involved a health inspector showing up at the Krusty Krab, announcing that someone in the restaurant was infected with a fictional virus called the clam flu, and locking everyone inside the building until they figured out who the carrier was. Panic spreads. The customers turn on each other. Mr. Krabs eventually decides the best solution is to grab the suspected sick person and throw them in the freezer. The episode was scheduled to air. Then COVID happened. Production on the episode had been completed in 2019, well before anyone in the world had heard the term coronavirus. The story had been written even earlier than that. SpongeBob, like most cartoons, has a long pipeline. Scripts get written, storyboards get drawn, voice actors record their lines, animation is done overseas, music is added. By the time an episode is actually ready to broadcast, the people who first wrote it might have moved on to writing episodes that will not air for another year. That is just how the industry works. So when Quarantined Crab was sitting in the vault waiting for its premiere date, nobody involved in making it had any idea that the entire planet was about to shut down over a real virus. In March 2020, the world changed. Schools closed, offices emptied, hospitals filled up. The phrase global pandemic stopped being a thing people only heard in disaster movies and started being something they were living through every single day. Bikini Bottom, sitting in a finished cartoon file on a Nickelodeon server, suddenly had an episode about a pandemic that nobody could possibly air without it landing very, very wrong. Nickelodeon pulled it. They did not say much. Around the same time, journalists were asking the the network about another SpongeBob episode that was missing from rotation, the one about the panty raid, and Nickelodeon spokesperson David Bittler used the same conversation to address Quarantined Crab. He said the episode had been held back because of what he called sensitivities surrounding the global, real-world pandemic. The network was not banning the episode forever. They were waiting. 2 years passed. The episode sat there. People in the SpongeBob fan community knew about it. Production information had been released. The voice cast had recorded their lines. The animation existed. There were even small clips and references online from people who had seen test versions. Fans started to wonder if Quarantined Crab was going to become a permanently shelved episode, the kind of finished thing that exists somewhere in a corporate archive but never reaches an audience. Then, in April 2022, with the worst phase of the pandemic over, Nickelodeon quietly released it. It aired on April 29th, 2022, paired with a different episode called Who Are Zoo. Officially, it was listed as Season 12, Episode 25. The 2-year delay was over. The strange part is that the episode is not really mocking the pandemic. Watching it now, knowing what was happening in the world when it was almost broadcast, it plays like a piece of writing that accidentally got too close to reality. The story actually catches a lot of things that happened in 2020 and 2021. It is not subtle about it, but it is also not making fun of those things. It is just describing them in cartoon form, 2 years ahead of schedule. The plot starts with a normal day at the Krusty Krab. Customers are eating Krabby Patties. SpongeBob is at the grill. Squidward is at the register. Standard setup. Then, a fish in a hazmat suit walks in, identifies himself as a health inspector, and announces that someone in the restaurant has been exposed to the clam flu. Nobody is allowed to leave until he figures out who. The doors lock. The windows are sealed. Everyone inside has to stay inside. What follows is the kind of social collapse cartoon shows have done forever, but with details that hit different in 2022 than they would have in any other year. The customers start watching each other. They look for symptoms. They argue about who looks the sickest. They start refusing to be near each other. Mr. Krabs, who is in there with everyone else and is losing money every minute the restaurant is locked down, gets desperate. He decides the simplest fix is to grab whoever the inspector thinks is sick and put them in the freezer until the lockdown lifts. He explains, in passing, that this is something he used to do in his old Navy days. Just lock the sick guy up. Problem solved. In the actual real world that the episode was supposed to air into, this kind of story would have been disastrous. In March and April of 2020, real people were experiencing real lockdowns. Real customers were getting into fights in real grocery stores about masks and distance. Real workers in restaurants and hospitals were watching their coworkers get sick and not knowing whether they were next. Real Asian Americans, in particular, were being attacked on streets across the country because of where the virus had originally come from. And the kind of ugly logic that says lock the sick person away rather than care for them was something that was actually being applied to actual human beings. The episode, made before any of this, was a satire of a thing that did not yet exist. By the time it was ready to air, it was a satire of a thing that was crushing the world. A network airing it in spring 2020 would have looked, at best, tone deaf. At worst, like they were making a joke about something that had already killed hundreds of thousands of people in the United States alone. So they shelved it. They did the responsible thing. By April 2022, 2 years later, the situation had shifted. The death toll was still rising, but the daily texture of the pandemic had changed. Most lockdowns had ended. Vaccines were widely available. The cultural conversation around COVID was quieter than it had been at the peak. The World Health Organization would not officially declare the public health emergency over until May 2023, but the viewing public was, in general, ready to look at art that engaged with the pandemic without flinching as hard as they would have in 2020. Nickelodeon decided that was enough. The episode aired. It was watched. The network did not put out a press release. They did not flag the 2-year delay in their promotional materials. They just slipped it into the schedule on a normal Friday and let it run. What is interesting about Quarantined Crab is how the meaning of the episode changed without a single frame of animation being altered. When the episode was being written and storyboarded in 2018 and 2019, it was a goofy cartoon story about a fictional health scare in a fictional restaurant. The clam flu was a made-up disease. The lockdown was a sitcom plot device. Mr. Krabs putting somebody in the freezer was a Mr. Krabs joke, the kind of thing the show had been doing with that character for 20 years. None of it was meant to comment on anything real. Then the world caught up to the script. Suddenly, the made-up disease looked like a stand-in for an actual disease. The cartoon lockdown looked like a stand-in for actual lockdowns. Mr. Krabs deciding to lock up the sick patron looked like a sharp jab at the way real societies were treating real people who got sick. The episode had not changed. The audience had changed. The world the audience was returning to had changed. This is one of the rarest things that can happen to a piece of finished media. A show that gets reviewed by network standards before airing usually gets evaluated based on what it says. Quarantined Crab got evaluated and then re-evaluated based on what the world said. The episode itself did not become any darker or any lighter. It became more relevant in a way that hurt, and then less relevant in a way that the network decided was finally manageable. There is a detail in how the freezer scene plays out that becomes very strange to watch in 2022 and beyond. Mr. Krabs treats the act of locking the sick person away as obvious common sense. Nobody in the restaurant pushes back hard. There is some grumbling, some humor, but the basic idea that the right move is to remove the infected person from the group rather than help them gets accepted as the easiest path forward. SpongeBob is, predictably, the moral voice. He suggests being kind. He gets ignored. The plot moves on. This is exactly the dynamic that played out in real life during the early months of the pandemic. People who tested positive were sometimes treated like contamination rather than patients. There were stories of neighbors calling the police on apartment dwellers who had COVID. There were stories of healthcare workers being kicked out of rented housing because their landlords were afraid. Whole neighborhoods, especially in Asian American communities, were treated as if they were the disease. The cartoon version of this had been written before any of it happened. The cartoon was prophetic in the unfortunate way that satire sometimes is, where the writers were not predicting anything, but the basic logic of how humans behave under pressure is consistent enough that you can write it in a vacuum and have it land in real life 2 years later. The episode itself, watched without that context, is fine. It is a season 12 SpongeBob episode. It is fast-paced. It has the modern animation style that some longtime fans like and some do not. The jokes hit at roughly the rate the late-era show hits its jokes. There is no scene in it that, taken alone, would have been controversial in any other era. The story resolves cleanly. The clam flu turns out to be less serious than the inspector made it sound. Everyone goes home. The restaurant reopens. Bikini Bottom moves on. What makes Quarantined Crab worth talking about is not the content of the episode. It is the gap, the 2 years it sat unaired, the choice the network made to wait, the way the episode became something different from what it was made to be, simply by waiting. There is a small irony in the fact that this episode and the Panty Raid episode were being discussed in the same news cycle in 2021, both treated as SpongeBob episodes Nickelodeon was holding back. The two cases could not be more different. Midlife Crustation was being permanently buried because the show had aged poorly. The episode itself was the problem. Time had not made it worse. Time had simply revealed how it had always been a little gross, in ways the people airing it in 2003 had not flagged. Quarantined Crab was the opposite. The episode itself was fine. Time made the world around it harder to put it into. The episode was waiting for the world to settle down enough that it could be released without doing harm. One was a shelving for content. The other was a shelving for context. Nickelodeon handled both quietly. They handled both without much explanation. Both of them ended with the network making a call about timing rather than about the episode itself. In the case of Midlife Crustation, the call was that the timing would never come. 20 years had passed since the original airing, and the cultural moment that would let that episode return to rotation had not arrived, and was not arriving anytime soon. In the case of Quarantined Crab, the call was that the timing was now, April 2022. 2 years had been long enough. There is a question worth asking about what it means for a children's show to have to make these choices at all. SpongeBob has been on the air since 1999. It has aired through the September 11 attacks, through wars, through 3 presidential elections that turned violent, through a pandemic, through reckonings about race and gender and old jokes. Most of the episodes in that long run have been about a sponge frying burgers under the sea. A handful of them, every once in a while, brush up against something real, and the network has to decide what to do. The pattern, looking at it across 2 decades, is that the network mostly decides through silence. Episodes get pulled. Episodes get held back. Episodes get released 2 years late on a quiet Friday with no announcement. There is rarely a press release. There is rarely a content warning. There is rarely an admission that something has been changed. The decisions get made in a back office, and the audience finds out months or years later, usually because a journalist asks the right question. Quarantined Crab is the cleanest case study of this. An episode that was never controversial. An episode that nobody in the audience was angry about. An episode that simply could not be aired in the moment it was made for, and that the network handled by waiting. 2 years of waiting, ended by one Friday airing in 2022 with no fanfare. That kind of quiet handling is the network's preferred mode. It avoids fights. It avoids explanations. It works most of the time. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. It does not always work, though. There is at least one episode in the SpongeBob library where the network's silent handling of a problem became its own kind of mystery, where the cut was made in 2002 and the reason was never officially given, and where fans spent the next 2 decades piecing together the answer from interviews, archived posts, and the simple fact of when the episode first aired, which was 3 weeks and 3 days after the worst day in modern American history. Section 3, Just One Bite, the gasoline scene that disappeared after 9/11. Just One Bite is one of the most beloved episodes SpongeBob ever made. The Squidward face, the ravioli line, the chunk of Krabby Patty he eats at midnight that triggers the entire second half of the story. For a generation of fans, this is one of the episodes that defined the show, the kind of thing people quote without even meaning to. Most fans can describe the plot from memory. Most fans can recite at least one line from it. What most fans cannot remember is the original ending. Just One Bite first aired on Nickelodeon in the United States on October 5th, 2001. It was the first part of episode 11 of season 3. SpongeBob spends the day trying to convince Squidward, who has never tried a Krabby Patty in his entire life, to actually take a bite. Squidward refuses out of pure stubbornness. He hates everything SpongeBob loves. He insists the Krabby Patty must be disgusting. SpongeBob keeps pushing. Eventually, Squidward gives in. He takes one bite. The bite changes him. He becomes obsessed. He starts eating Krabby Patties in secret, then in larger and larger amounts, until he eats so many that his entire body explodes, and he ends up in a hospital, his head wrapped in bandages, getting wheeled away in an ambulance. That is the version most people remember. That is the version that has been on television for the last 20 plus years, on DVDs, on streaming services, on YouTube clips, on every official copy of the episode in the United States. It is a tight, weird, perfectly paced 11 minutes of cartoon comedy. It is also missing 40 seconds. The original cut of the episode, the version that aired exactly one time on October 5th, 2001, contained a sequence near the end that has never been broadcast on American television since. In that sequence, after Squidward has become addicted to Krabby Patties, he sneaks back to the Krusty Krab in the middle of the night to break in and steal more. The restaurant, in the original cut, has a security system installed by Mr. Krabs to keep Plankton out. Squidward does not know about it. He approaches the front door. He sees a small bucket of liquid sitting near the entrance. He assumes it is water and dismisses it. He kicks the door open. The bucket tips over. The liquid spills out across the floor. Squidward sniffs it. It is not water. It is gasoline. A small mechanical arm, clearly part of the security system, drops a lit match into the puddle. The Krusty Krab entrance bursts into flames around him. Squidward screams. He is engulfed in fire. He stumbles inside, charred and smoking, and just when he thinks the worst is over, he triggers a second identical trap, a second bucket of gasoline, a second match, a second explosion. He gets set on fire all over again. The kitchen ignites for several seconds before the camera cuts away to the next scene, which is the patty vault, and the rest of the episode plays out as the version everyone knows. The whole sequence is about 40 seconds long. It happened twice. It is, by the standards of the show at that time, one of the most graphic and direct depictions of physical injury ever animated for SpongeBob. It is also a clear, step-by-step demonstration of how to mix gasoline and an open flame to produce a fire, performed by a character familiar to every child watching the show. The original air date was October 5th, 2001. The September 11th attacks had occurred 24 days earlier. The country was still in the immediate shock period. The news every night was full of footage of buildings on fire and people running through smoke. Major studios across the entertainment industry were pulling content that suddenly looked different in light of what had happened. Movie posters were being changed. Trailers were being delayed. Episodes of television shows that involved planes, explosions, or terrorism were being reshelved or rewritten. The cultural floor had moved. Just One Bite was finished and ready to air well before the attacks. The episode had gone through every layer of Nickelodeon's normal review process. It had been approved. The gasoline sequence was, by the standards of the show in 2000 and early 2001, an aggressive but acceptable cartoon cartoon gag, the kind of slapstick violence that got compared to old Looney Tunes shorts. A character gets blown up, the character is fine, the audience laughs. After September 11th, that math changed. The show aired the original cut on October 5th, and then, before the next rerun, the network pulled the gasoline sequence. The cut they made was clean. The episode was edited to skip directly from Squidward arriving at the Krusty Krab to the interior shot of the patty vault. The transition is not exactly smooth, but unless a viewer is looking for it, the edit reads as a normal scene change. Most kids watching the rerun never noticed anything was missing. Most kids watching the show today have no idea the original version ever existed. For years, Nickelodeon never officially explained the cut. They did not put out a statement, they did not flag it as a content removal. The scene simply stopped appearing, and fans who remembered it from the first airing were told over and over that they were misremembering. There was no second airing of the gasoline scene to point to. There was no DVD release that included it in the United States. The scene only survived in two places. The first was on Canadian airings of the episode, where the country's broadcast standards apparently kept the original cut for years afterward. The second was in early bootleg copies, recorded off cable on October 5th, 2001, by fans who happened to have their VCRs running. The first concrete explanation for the cut came in 2007, more than 5 years after it had been made. A writer named Jay Lender, who had worked on the episode, gave an interview to a fan site called SpongeBob Mania. He said that the original version of the episode had passed every layer of normal Nickelodeon approval before it aired. He confirmed that the September 11th attacks were a major part of the decision to pull the scene from later airings. He also mentioned that the cut had to do with what is called standards and practices, which is the part of any television network in charge of deciding what is and is not appropriate for broadcast. In June 2018, another voice from the show stepped forward. Vincent Waller, who at that point was the creative director of SpongeBob, posted on Twitter that the removal had been because of a standards and practices issue. Specifically, he said Nickelodeon had decided they did not want a gag that involved a match and gasoline on the air. The reason was simple and unsurprising. A children's show that demonstrates how to start a fire twice in the middle of a story everyone is laughing at runs the risk of teaching a kid exactly the wrong thing. After September 11th, when fire and explosions were part of the everyday news, that risk got reweighted. The gag stopped being acceptable. The fact that two different people from inside the show, speaking 11 years apart, both pointed to the same combination of reasons, the September 11th climate plus the imitable behavior, suggests the official internal explanation lined up with what fans had already worked out for themselves. There is a small follow-up to this story that says something about how the show's standards have shifted over time. In a later season, season 13, SpongeBob aired an episode called SpongeBob on Parade. The climax of that episode involves a parade float full of gasoline catching on fire. When fans on social media asked Vincent Waller why a similar gag was suddenly fine again decades after the Just One Bite cut, his answer was specific. He said the difference was about whether the action could be copied. A bucket of gasoline above a doorway is something a kid could actually set up at home. A parade float full of gasoline is not. One is what he called an imitable action. The other is not. That distinction is the cleanest explanation of why the original Just One Bite scene got cut and never came back. It is not really about violence. SpongeBob has been showing animated violence forever. Squidward has been crushed, flattened, burned, frozen, and exploded across hundreds of episodes, often more graphically than the gasoline gag. The line for the network was about whether a child watching could imitate what they saw with materials they could plausibly access. Most kids do not have parade floats. Some kids do have access to gasoline and matches. The trap Mr. Krabs builds in the original cut of Just One Bite is the kind of thing that, if a kid were to recreate it as a prank on a friend, could actually kill that friend. That is the line. In the months after the cut, fans who remembered the original tried to figure out what had happened. With the internet of 2002 still being slow and limited, the conversation was scattered. Some people thought they were remembering wrong. Some people thought a bootleg version was a fake. The Canadian airings became the main piece of evidence that the scene was real. Tape traders began passing around recordings recordings made off Canadian YTV broadcasts, where the original cut continued to play. A handful of fans posted screenshots online. By the late 2000s, with YouTube growing, full uploads of the deleted scenes started to appear. Most of them were taken down by Nickelodeon's copyright claims. New ones kept getting uploaded. The scene became one of the most searched pieces of cut SpongeBob content ever. Fans wrote articles about it. Online petitions started up, including one on change.org that asked Nickelodeon to put the scene back into the episode. The petition argued that the original reason for the cut was tied to a specific historical moment and that the moment had passed. They pointed out that other SpongeBob episodes had aired even more graphic injuries, like the famous House Fancy moment where Squidward rips off his own toenail in unflinching detail. If that scene was acceptable, the petitioners argued, the gasoline scene should be too. Nickelodeon never responded to the petition. The scene has stayed cut. There are a few reasons it has probably stayed cut. The first is that nobody at the network has any reason to revisit the decision. The episode is one of the most popular in the entire run of the show, without the deleted scene. Adding it back would invite a fresh round of conversations about why it was ever cut, why it is being added back now, what the network's policy on imitable behavior is, and so on. None of those conversations help anyone at the network. The episode plays well as it is. Disturbing the rotation makes more problems than it solves. The second reason is that the imitable behavior concern is still real. Children still occasionally get hurt copying things they see on screen. Networks still get sued. Bringing back a sequence that demonstrates how to mix gasoline and an open flame, in 2026, in a media environment where everything goes viral instantly and a single accident can become a national story, is a risk that nobody at Nickelodeon has any reason to take. The third reason is more cultural. A lot of the fans who remember the original cut are now adults. The version of the episode they want back is, in part, a version that exists in their memory of being kids in 2001. The episode has lived on television for 2 decades without the gasoline scene. The current version is now the canonical version for almost everyone who has watched the show in the last 15 years. Putting the scene back would mean changing what most of the audience now thinks of as the episode itself. The original cut has become a kind of legend, a thing that fans of a certain age know exists, that newer fans hear about and try to track down on YouTube. That status is more interesting in some ways than the scene itself would be if it just went back into the rotation. There is one more piece of trivia that captures how strange the cut has become. Fans who have collected different airings of the episode have noticed that the order of the 2 segments in the half-hour block actually changes depending on which version is being broadcast. In airings that contain the uncut original, Just One Bite plays second, after the sister episode called The Bully. In airings of the censored version, Just One Bite plays first. The order flip became, for a while, a way for fans to tell at a glance which version they were about to see. Show The Bully first, gasoline scene is gone. Show Just One Bite first, gasoline scene is in. The convention is not perfect, but it held for years across most international airings. The most important thing about the gasoline scene, looking back at it now, is what it shows about how a single piece of cartoon animation can quietly become something different than what it was. The scene was approved as a gag. It aired as a gag. 24 days before it aired, the country watched buildings burn and collapse on live television. The scene that had passed every layer of approval became, within a single news cycle, something that no network executive in their right mind wanted to keep on the air. The cut took a 40-second sequence that the writers had probably labored over for weeks and removed it from history. 40 seconds is not a long time. In the context of an 11-minute episode, it is barely a sliver, but the cut tells a story about how television actually works in moments of national pain. The decisions are quick. The decisions are unannounced. The decisions are made by people in offices who are looking at the news and at their schedule and trying to figure out in real time what kind of show they are going to be on the other side of whatever is happening. The Just One Bite cut is, to this day, the cleanest example of that process happening to SpongeBob. It is the thing that made the network move fastest. It is the thing they have been quietest about for the longest. The official reason came out in interviews 5 and 17 years after the fact by writers and producers who had worked on the show, rather than from the network itself. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. There are other episodes, though, where the network has taken the opposite approach, where the audience asked, sometimes begged, for the network to act. act, and the network refused. Where the content of the episode was not about a fire, or a virus, or a panty raid, but something darker that the writers chose to put in the show on purpose. 3 of those episodes still air on Paramount Plus today, untouched, as if nothing about them is unusual at all. Section 4, One Course Meal, Are You Happy Now? And A Pal for Gary, the episodes that should have been banned. There are 3 episodes of SpongeBob SquarePants that, by any reasonable measure, are darker than Midlife Crustation. They are darker than the gasoline scene from Just One Bite. They are arguably darker than anything else in the show's 26-year run. None of them have been pulled. None of them have been edited. All 3 of them are, as of today, still available on Paramount Plus, exactly as they originally aired. A child can click on any of them right now and watch the whole thing. The strange part is that fans have been asking the network to remove all 3 for over a decade. There have been petitions. There have been thousands of signatures. There have been articles, video essays, and Reddit threads dedicated to explaining why these episodes should not be airing on a children's network. Nickelodeon has, in every case, said nothing. The episodes stay. The first one is called One Course Meal. It aired on March 25th, 2010, as part of episode 11 of season 7. The original working title for the episode was Plankton Got Served, which the production team eventually changed, although a title card with the original name was actually animated. The episode begins with Plankton trying to steal the secret formula from the Krusty Krab. He has captured Mr. Krabs and SpongeBob and tied them up. He is about to win. Then Pearl, Mr. Krabs' teenage daughter, walks in. Plankton sees Pearl, who is a whale, and immediately flees in terror. He claims that his ancestors were eaten by whales, and that he has lived his entire life in fear of them. Mr. Krabs, watching this happen, decides that this fear is something he can use. He buys a Pearl costume. He starts dressing up as his own daughter and following Plankton around Bikini Bottom, scaring him in his own home, scaring him at his restaurant, scaring him in the streets. He does this for 16 straight days. Plankton stops sleeping. He has nightmares of giant whales eating his entire family. He becomes paranoid. He stops being able to function. The torture is constant. Eventually, Plankton breaks. He walks out into the middle of the road. He lies down in the path of an oncoming bus. He waits to be killed. This is not a misreading of the episode. This is what literally happens on screen. SpongeBob walks by, sees Plankton lying in the road, and Plankton tells him directly that he is planning to be run over by the bus because he cannot take it anymore. SpongeBob's first reaction is mild and uninterested. He says, in effect, "All right, see you later." He starts to walk away. Then he stops himself, comes back, and tells Plankton that the whale he has been seeing is not real, that it is just Mr. Krabs in a costume. Plankton gets up, furious, and goes to take revenge. The revenge is brief. Plankton finds out that Mr. Krabs is afraid of mimes, and uses a couple of mimes to scare him for a few seconds. The episode treats this small comeuppance as a balanced ending. The mathematics of the story is 16 days of psychological torment leading to a severe breakdown on one side, 3 seconds of mime fear on the other. The episode plays this as if it is even. When SpongeBob walks up to Mr. Krabs at the end of the episode and tells him that Plankton is lying in the street, Mr. Krabs laughs. He says Plankton is a mess and finds the whole thing funny. The episode does not punish him for this. The episode does not even seem to notice. SpongeBob, who is normally the moral voice of the show, does not push back hard. He briefly says Krabs has gone too far in a soft tone, and then the plot keeps moving. The fan response was loud and fast. Within months of the episode's first airing, online communities were calling it the worst episode of the entire show. Petition campaigns started on change.org asking Nickelodeon to ban it. The petitions argued that the episode treats suicide as a punchline, that it portrays a main character laughing at another character's mental collapse, and that this content has no business being on a children's network. The petitions gathered thousands of signatures. They were repeatedly ignored. Critics outside the fan community joined in. Major review channels on YouTube ranked One Course Meal as the worst SpongeBob episode ever made. Watch Mojo gave it the #1 slot on their worst SpongeBob episodes list. The show The Mysterious Mr. Enter ranked it the second worst episode of the entire series. Phantom Strider ranked it as #1. Years later, sources connected to the show reported that someone in the production had personally apologized for the episode, although exactly which crew member offered the apology has been reported differently in different sources. The names that come up most often are Steven Hillenburg himself, the writer Mr. Lawrence and the actor Clancy Brown, who voices Mr. Krabs. The apology, in any version, was informal. It was never an official statement from the network. The episode has not been removed from Paramount Plus. It has not been removed from rotation. It has not been edited. It airs in 2026 exactly as it aired in 2010. The second episode in this trio is called Are You Happy Now? It aired on March 31st, 2012, as part of episode 17 of season 8. The setup is innocent enough. SpongeBob is reading a book of happy memories and decides to ask Squidward what his happiest memory is. Squidward thinks about it for a moment and admits, with no joke and no punchline, that he does not have one. He cannot remember a single happy moment in his entire life. The episode could have gone in 100 lighter directions from there. It does not. It goes into a depression story. SpongeBob spends the first half trying to manufacture happy memories for Squidward, all of which fail. Squidward sinks deeper and deeper into a state the episode portrays as clinical, full-body depression. He stops leaving his house. He stops bathing. He grows a stubble. He sits in dark rooms doing nothing. The animators draw him with heavy bags under his eyes and a slumped posture that lines up with how real depression actually looks. Then the episode does something that even fans of dark humor flinched at. It plays two self-harm gags directly, framed as bait-and-switch jokes. In the first, Squidward walks toward his oven, opens the door, and the scene cuts away. The shot is held long enough for the audience to register what they are seeing. Then the camera pulls back and reveals he is just taking a tray of brownies out of the oven. The joke depends on the audience genuinely thinking, even for a second, that an animated character on a children's show was about to put himself in serious danger. The second gag is worse. Squidward is shown throwing a rope over a ceiling beam and pulling it tight. The audience watches him do this for several seconds. Then the reveal comes. He is hanging a bird cage. The episode plays this as a punchline. The episode ends with SpongeBob throwing Squidward a surprise party that nobody attends. SpongeBob has built dozens of papier-mâché copies of himself to fill the empty room. Squidward, when faced with this, does not have a peaceful breakthrough. He has an intense breakdown. He starts smashing the SpongeBob copies one by one in a state of pure rage. The episode frames this as Squidward finally finding his happiest memory. The destruction of dozens of fake copies of his only friend is, the show suggests, the moment he finally cheers up. The reaction was the same shape as the one-course meal reaction. Fans were horrified. Critics ranked it among the worst episodes of the show. Some fans pointed out, fairly, that other SpongeBob episodes had made jokes that brushed against suicide before, including a famous deadpan line in Band Geeks, where Squidward narrowly avoids being impaled and says it is too bad it did not kill him. The difference, the critics argued, was context. The earlier jokes were one-liners that took half a second and moved on. The Are You Happy Now jokes are full visual setups, designed to make the audience think they are watching something terrible happen, with a depressed character at the center of an episode that has spent its whole runtime building up his mental collapse. The episode airs on Paramount Plus today. It airs in syndication. It has not been edited. It has not been pulled. It is one click away from a kindergartner with an iPad. The third episode is A Pal for Gary. It aired on July 24th, 2010, as part of season 7, paired with another episode called Keep Bikini Bottom Beautiful. The plot is simpler than the other two, but ends in a place that is, in some ways, harder to defend. SpongeBob decides Gary needs a friend. He goes to a pet store. The store owner shows him a creature called Puffy Fluffy, which looks like a tiny pink fuzzy ball. The store owner explicitly warns SpongeBob that Puffy Fluffy is dangerous. SpongeBob does not listen. He takes the pet home. Puffy Fluffy turns out to be a monster. Whenever SpongeBob is not looking, the creature transforms into a huge fanged thing with multiple tongues and tries to eat Gary. The animators designed Puffy Fluffy to be genuinely frightening, with sharp, jagged teeth and a large mouth. The character designer who created the monster form, Robert Ryan Corey, reportedly took the design down from his public art page after the episode aired because of how strong the negative reactions were. Across the entire episode, Gary is repeatedly attacked, terrorized, and nearly eaten by Puffy Fluffy, while SpongeBob refuses to see what is happening. Whenever SpongeBob walks into a room, Puffy Fluffy reverts to the cute, fluffy form. Whenever SpongeBob leaves, the monster comes back out. SpongeBob, throughout the episode, blames Gary for everything. He scolds Gary. He punishes Gary. He locks Gary in rooms with the monster. The most infamous moment comes near the end. Puffy Fluffy has Gary in his open open mouth, holding him up in the air, clearly about to swallow him whole. SpongeBob walks into the room. He sees this happening. He sees his pet snail, his closest companion across the entire history of the show, suspended inside the mouth of a monster. His response is to scold Gary, telling him to stop bothering Puffy Fluffy and put him down. The line, delivered straight, has become one of the most famous moments of bad SpongeBob writing. The visual is unmistakable. The character's reaction is unforgivable. Gary eventually saves himself and SpongeBob both, fighting off Puffy Fluffy with a tiny lasso and chasing the monster out of the house. Even after this, SpongeBob does not apologize. He does not thank Gary. He does not acknowledge that he was wrong. The episode ends with SpongeBob taking Gary to work as a kind of compromise, and Mr. Krabs deciding to put Gary to work as a second fry cook. A Pal for Gary has been ranked as one of the absolute worst episodes of SpongeBob by nearly every major reviewer of the show. It currently holds an IMDb rating of 3.2 out of 10, alongside its sister episode, which is among the lowest ratings any episode of the show has ever received. Fans have written extensively about the episode's cruelty, the betrayal of Gary's character, and the failure of SpongeBob's typical empathy. Petition efforts have asked for it to be pulled. Like the others, it has not been. What links these three episodes is the network's response, which has been silence in all three cases. There has been no apology. There has been no edit. There has been no removal. The episodes are now between 14 and 16 years old. They have aged through several different eras of cultural conversation about mental health, suicide depiction in media, and animal cruelty. None of those conversations have reached deep enough into Nickelodeon to change the status of any of them. The contrast with the Panty Raid episode is sharp. Midlife Crustation was pulled. 3 episodes about suicide attempts, depression, and animal abuse are still airing. The pattern, looking at it across the whole catalog, suggests that Nickelodeon's standards are not really about how dark an episode is. The standards are about how the episode looks in retrospect. A Panty Raid is something the network does not want to be associated with in 2018 because the cultural moment had moved. A character lying in front of a bus is something the network will leave on the air for 16 years and counting because, apparently, the cultural moment has not moved enough to force their hand on it. This is a strange position for a major children's network to hold in public. The fact that they hold it without comment makes it stranger. There are entire essay channels on YouTube dedicated to picking apart these 3 episodes, and the network has not engaged with any of them. The official position is that there is nothing to discuss. The unofficial position, gathered from former crew members speaking on podcasts and in interviews, is that the people who made some of these episodes know they went too far. The reported apologies for one-course meal, whoever actually delivered them, suggests that internal acknowledgement has happened. The lack of public action, despite that internal acknowledgement, suggests that the network has decided the easiest path is to leave everything where it is and hope the conversation eventually fades. There is a strange and important detail about how these dark episodes were received by the broader fan community in the years after their original airings. Rather than disappearing into the back catalog, they kept getting talked about. They became part of the show's identity in a way the network probably did not plan for. A version of SpongeBob that had only ever made happy episodes about jellyfish hunting would not have produced the kind of culture that surrounds the show today. The dark episodes, the cutscenes, the buried stories, the rumors of stranger and darker things being kept from viewers, all started feeding into something larger than the show itself. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. By 2010, the year both One Course Meal and A Pal for Gary first aired, the show had already become the subject of stories that were genuinely impossible to put on television. Stories that had no production code, no air date, no place in any official record. Stories that lived on internet forums, told in the voice of supposed insiders, about episodes that supposedly existed somewhere on locked tapes in unmarked vaults. The most famous of those stories was about Squidward, a clarinet, a concert that went wrong, and a final shot that the show could never have animated, set to a sound the show could never have produced, on a tape that may have never existed at all. Section 5. Bikini Bottom is a nuclear test site, the theory that got confirmed. For most of SpongeBob's run, the strangest fan theory about the show was also the one with the most evidence. The theory had been bouncing around the internet since at least the late 2000s, building slowly on Reddit threads and YouTube videos, accumulating stimulating fans who took it seriously and skeptics who thought it was reaching. The basic idea was simple. The fictional town the show is set in, Bikini Bottom, is named after a real place. That real place is one of the most contaminated patches of ocean on Earth, and every talking sea creature in the show, including the title character, is a mutant created by the radiation from 67 atomic bombs. The theory came from Reddit. The original thread is widely attributed to a user named Capmaster, who pointed out the basic geography. Bikini Bottom is, by the show's own setup, located underneath Bikini Atoll. Bikini Atoll is a real coral reef in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, part of a chain of islands called the Marshall Islands. It sits about halfway between Hawaii and Papua New Guinea. It is empty now. No human beings live there. The reason no human beings live there is because the United States government tested nuclear weapons on it for 12 straight years. The history of Bikini Atoll is dark in a way that most cartoon viewers have never been told. The Marshall Islands were taken over by the American military at the end of World War II. The American government, looking for a place to test the new weapons technology coming out of the Manhattan Project, decided that this remote chain of islands was the perfect spot. The Bikini Islanders, a group of about 167 people who had lived on the atoll for generations, were forcibly removed in 1946. They were told they could come back after the testing was done. The testing went on for 12 years. Between 1946 and 1958, the United States government detonated 67 nuclear weapons on and around Bikini Atoll. The bombs were placed underwater, in the air, and on the surface of the islands. Some of the explosions were small, many of them were not. The most powerful single test, called Castle Bravo, took place on March 1st, 1954. It produced an explosion equivalent to roughly 1,000 Hiroshima-sized bombs going off at once. The blast destroyed 3 islands entirely. The radioactive fallout spread for hundreds of miles. The Bikini Islanders were never able to go home. The radiation that had soaked into the soil and the water did not fade. The American government tried to bring some of them back in 1972, but by 1978 they had to evacuate them again because the people who had returned were found to have ingested more radioactive material in their bodies than any other known human population on the planet. The atoll has been empty of human life ever since. It will remain unsafe for human habitation for thousands of years. This is the place SpongeBob is set in. Not in some fictional version of it, the actual real place, with the actual real history. The town is named after the bottom of the atoll. The original character pitch documents, written by Stephen Hillenburg, the show's creator, refer to the location specifically as the bottom of Bikini Atoll. Hillenburg, before he created the show, was a marine biologist who taught at the Ocean Institute in California. He knew the history. He knew what the name meant. The theory, in its simplest form, says the following. The talking sea creatures of Bikini Bottom can talk because they were mutated by the nuclear testing. Their ability to walk on 2 arms, run businesses, drive cars, and play instruments is a result of decades of radiation exposure. The show's strange logic, including the fact that fire works underwater, the fact that the characters seem to live in a world both connected to and separated from the surface, the fact that the town has all the features of a normal American suburb, despite being made up of fish and crabs and starfish, can all be explained if Bikini Bottom is the result of an atomic accident the rest of the world is not paying attention to. For years, the theory was treated as exactly what it sounded like, a fun fan reading, the kind of thing Reddit users put together late at night, supported by the geography and the name and a few visual clues from the show, but never officially acknowledged by the people making it. Stephen Hillenburg himself, who passed away in 2018, never publicly confirmed or denied the theory. He spoke about Bikini Atoll as the geographic inspiration for the location, but he never went on record to say that the radiation was the in-universe explanation for any of the characters. That changed in late 2024. The change came in an unexpected way. The men's magazine Esquire, as part of a feature on the show's 25th anniversary, brought together several of the main voice actors and writers from SpongeBob for a reunion-style video. The cast included Tom Kenny, the voice of SpongeBob, Bill Fagerbach, the voice of Patrick, Roger Bumpus, the voice of Squidward, and a man named Doug Lawrence, known professionally as Mr. Lawrence, who has been with the show since the very beginning. Lawrence is the voice of Plankton. He is also one of the show's longest-serving writers. He has worked on dozens of episodes across the show's history. When he speaks about the show, he is speaking with the authority of someone who has been making it for over 25 years. During the conversation, the actors started talking about fan theories. At around the 4-minute and 16-second mark of the video, Roger Bumpus mentioned the nuclear theory directly. He said he had always liked the theory that the whole show was related to the atomic testing in Bikini Atoll. He said it casually, in the tone someone uses when they bring up a fun fan reading they have heard before, but never taken too seriously. Mr. Lawrence cut in. His exact words, on camera, in the recorded interview, were that the theory is true. He said it twice. He said it is absolutely true. Bumpus, surprised, said he had been telling people the theory was not true. Lawrence repeated himself. He said it is absolutely true. Then he added that the question, while they were making the show, had been about how far they were willing to take the concept. Lawrence then went further. He said that the original idea behind the show was that the human world above the ocean had been destroyed. He used the phrase post-apocalyptic. He said that the world upstairs is gone and that all that is left is Bikini Bottom. According to him, this had been part of the show's foundational premise. This is, by any measure, one of the biggest in-universe confirmations a long-running fan theory has ever received. A senior writer on the show, on camera, in an official interview tied to the anniversary of the show, saying directly that the most famous dark theory about the show is correct. The implications, if you take Lawrence's words at face value, are heavy. Every character in Bikini Bottom is a survivor of a global nuclear catastrophe. Every conversation, every Krabby Patty, every jellyfishing trip, every annoying neighbor moment between SpongeBob and Squidward is happening in a world where the surface has been wiped out. The cheerfulness of the show, the relentless optimism of SpongeBob, the small concerns of the characters about their jobs and their friendships are all happening on top of an unspoken background of mass death. The theory also explains, in a way that nothing else does, why the show feels the way it feels. Bikini Bottom does not behave like a normal underwater world. The fish drive cars, the starfish have houses, the crab runs a fast food restaurant, there is fire, there is electricity, there are televisions and telephones and radios. None of this is how the actual ocean works. The standard explanation, that this is just cartoon logic, holds up fine on a casual viewing. The nuclear theory offers a deeper one. The radiation broke biology. What grew back was not normal sea life. It was something new, something that had absorbed enough genetic material from 67 explosions worth of altered atmosphere that it ended up resembling the human society that had set off the bombs in the first place. There is a piece of visual evidence that fans have pointed to for years that Lawrence's confirmation now makes much harder to dismiss. When something explodes on SpongeBob, the shape of the explosion is often the shape of an atomic bomb. The mushroom cloud, the bright flash, the slow expansion of the dome of fire and smoke. This is not just a generic cartoon explosion. The specific shape, particularly in early seasons, lines up closely with photographs taken of the underwater nuclear tests at Bikini Atoll itself. The Operation Crossroads tests, conducted in 1946, included a famous underwater detonation called the Baker Shot, which produced an enormous dome of water and a circular cloud of mist. Photographs of the Baker Shot are public. Frame comparisons that fans have made between the Baker photographs and SpongeBob explosion animations show a similarity that is hard to call a coincidence. The Burke Museum in Seattle, which is connected to the University of Washington, published a piece by anthropologist Holly Barker in 2018, making the case that the show's location is based on the real history of nuclear testing. Barker had been teaching her students about the Marshall Islands and asked them what they associated with the word bikini. Almost every student in the class said SpongeBob SquarePants. Almost none of them could tell her anything about the actual atoll. The Burke Museum article argued that the show, intentionally or not, had inherited the cultural memory of a place that had become invisible. The bombs were forgotten. The cartoon was famous. The name had survived the disaster. Lawrence's confirmation in 2024 made a connection that had been there all along into something the show's own writers were willing to put their names on. The mutated Bikini Bottom theory is no longer just a reading. It is a reading the people making the show have backed up. There are some details Lawrence's confirmation does not quite fit. The show, as it has actually played out across nearly 300 episodes, has not always treated the human world as gone. There are episodes where humans appear on rowboats above. The episode Frankendoodle from season 2 features a human artist on a rowboat dropping a pencil into the sea. The two SpongeBob movies feature humans extensively. David Hasselhoff appears in person in the first movie. There is, on screen, evidence that the human world has not been destroyed. This contradiction can be read in a few ways. The most likely is that Lawrence is describing the original concept rather than the show as it actually went out. Concepts get changed during production. A premise that starts dark gets softened when the show needs to hit family-friendly tones. The first season of any cartoon is rarely identical to the pitch the showrunner brought into the room a year earlier. Lawrence may be saying, in effect, that the original plan for the show was a post-apocalyptic mutant story, and that the show's eventual lighter tone was layered on top of that foundation, rather than replacing it. Another reading is that the show simply has soft continuity. SpongeBob has never been a tightly plotted, serialized story. The same character can be alive and dead in different episodes. The same backstory can be told 3 different ways. The show plays loose with its own internal facts, because the form does not require otherwise. In that context, the existence of humans in some episodes does not really disprove anything, because the show does not hold itself to a single canonical timeline. Whatever the exact reading, the basic point stands. A senior writer on the show has confirmed in an official interview that the most famous dark theory about SpongeBob is true. Bikini Bottom is, in some sense, a nuclear test site. The characters are, in some sense, the result of the radiation. The world upstairs is, at least according to the show's original concept, not in good shape. This changes the experience of watching the show. A person who knew nothing about Bikini Atoll, who had never heard of Castle Bravo or the Bikini Islanders or the 67 Bombs, could watch SpongeBob as a simple, cheerful comedy about underwater life. A person who knows the history, especially after Lawrence's confirmation, watches a different show. The cheerfulness reads as something a culture has built on top of a wound. The town reads as a settlement that grew up where nothing should have been able to grow. The characters read as the descendants, or the literal mutated forms, of organisms that survive something most things do not survive. The strangeness of the show has always been part of what made it work. The nuclear theory, now confirmed, gives that strangeness a source. The show is not just weird. The show is weird because the world it depicts is the world after the worst thing that ever happened to a place did happen. The Krabby Patty is a meal eaten in the radioactive lagoon of an island the rest of the world has abandoned. The Krusty Krab is a restaurant built on top of a reef that should not exist. The friendship between a sponge and a starfish is a friendship between 2 creatures whose ancestors, in any other timeline, would not have made it. This kind of layered reading is what fan theories are supposed to do. They take the surface, which is a children's show, and they reveal a foundation underneath, which is sometimes much bigger than the surface suggested. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But not every fan theory about SpongeBob has the protective distance of being about geography or history. Some of them are about the show itself, about episodes that supposedly existed, about content that supposedly aired, about things a generation of fans claim to have seen with their own eyes on televisions they no longer have, in years that were too long ago to verify. One of those theories began as an anonymous post on an internet forum in April 2010. Within months, it had spread to a degree the show's writers could not ignore. Within years, the show itself would put a quiet visual reference to it inside an actual official episode. Section 6, Squidward's Suicide / Red Mist, How One Anonymous 7chan Post Created a Genre. On April 6, 2010, an anonymous user posted a story to a paranormal discussion board on a website called 7chan. The board was a small one. The user did not give a real name. The handle attached to the post was eventually traced back to someone who went by Suicide Squidward online, a person who has, in the years since, identified himself only by that handle and has never confirmed his real identity. The story he posted was a few thousand words long. It was framed as a true account, written in the first person, by someone who claimed to have once worked as an intern at Nickelodeon Studios. The story was about an episode of SpongeBob SquarePants, an episode that, according to the writer, was never meant to air, an episode that, according to the writer, only a handful of people had ever seen, in a private editing room in Burbank, California, in the year 2005. The story was titled Squidward's Suicide. Within 12 months, the story had become one of the most widely shared pieces of internet folklore of its era. Within 5 years, it had inspired thousands of imitators, an entire subgenre of online horror writing, and a quiet visual reference inside an actual SpongeBob episode that the network later edited out. The story is fake. There is no lost SpongeBob episode called Squidward's Suicide. There is no animator named Madison Richards or Andrew Skinner who worked on the show. The events described did not happen. None of the production details in the story match how SpongeBob is actually made. The show is not produced at Nickelodeon Studios. It is produced at a separate animation studio in Los Angeles called United Plankton Pictures, owned by Steven Hillenburg himself. The story does not need to be true to have changed the way internet horror works. The plot of the story, told quickly, is this. The narrator describes himself as one of 3 unpaid interns at Nickelodeon in 2005. He says he was allowed into private editing rooms with the lead animators and sound editors during what he calls final cut viewings of new episodes. The interns were used to seeing rough title cards put on episodes by the production team as inside jokes. The actual title for the episode they were about to watch was supposed to be Fear of a Krabby Patty. The title card that came up on the screen instead read Squidward's Suicide. The interns laughed. They thought it was a joke. The episode plays out in the early sections as a normal SpongeBob plot. Squidward is practicing his clarinet for an upcoming concert. SpongeBob and Patrick are laughing outside, distracting him. He yells at them to keep it down. They leave. He performs at the concert. The performance goes badly. Then, the writer says, the episode begins to change. The crowd at the concert does not boo Squidward in the normal cartoon way. The booing sounds, in the writer's description, like real human voices, full of malice. The audience members are drawn with what the writer calls hyper-realistic eyes. Eyes that look more real than CGI, but are clearly not photographs. Eyes with red pupils. SpongeBob is in the crowd booing. The shot lingers. The story continues. Squidward goes home. He sits on the edge of his bed. He starts to cry. The crying, in the description, sounds real. The wind outside his window starts to grow louder. There is a faint laugh underneath the wind. The crying gets louder. Dark fluid begins to run from Squidward's eyes. The screen flickers. A single frame appears on screen, then disappears. The writer says the editor in the room paused the playback and went back. The frame, when held still, shows a photograph of a child. Not a drawing, a real photograph. The image is severely disturbing. More frames appear, more photographs. The writer says the lead sound editor stopped the playback at this point and called for the show's creator. He says Steven Hillenburg arrived in the editing room within 15 minutes. The viewing continued. The writer describes the climax of the episode as a shot of Squidward in full frame, his eyes bleeding, his face taking up the whole screen, with a deep voice saying, "Do it." Squidward then, according to the story, picks up a weapon and the scene cuts away. The writer says the room was silent. He says the interns were sent home. He says he never returned to the studio. He says, in the final lines of the story, that there is no resolution, that if you came looking for an answer, you should be ready to be disappointed. There just is not one. That was the story. It was, in some ways, not the most well-written piece of internet horror that has ever been posted. The grammar is rough in places. The plot has holes. The premise itself, that an unpaid intern would be allowed into private editing rooms with the show's senior staff, does not hold up. Real interns do not get sat down in front of Final Cut episodes by lead animators. They run errands. They get coffee. The story leans on the kind of romantic idea of how television gets made that someone who has actually worked in television would not have written. But it landed. It landed at a particular moment, on a particular kind of website, with a particular kind of audience. The phrase creepypasta had been growing online for a few years by 2010, used to describe short horror stories that got copied and pasted around message boards. Most early creepypastas were quick, a few hundred words, a simple twist, something a reader could finish in a minute and share with a friend. Squidward's Suicide was longer. It had structure. It had the premise of being told from the inside of a real production by someone who could supposedly verify what he was saying. It used the actual names of real things. Nickelodeon Studios was real. The episode Fear of a Krabby Patty was real. SpongeBob was real. The story put a fake event inside a real frame, and that frame held up well enough to fool a casual reader into wondering, even briefly, whether any of it might be true. It also did something the genre had not yet done at scale. It used a children's show. The previous wave of creepypastas had used video games, like the famous one about a haunted Pokemon cartridge called Lavender Town Syndrome, or the one about a Majora's Mask game cartridge called Ben Drowned. Squidward's Suicide brought the format into a different territory. The show being attacked was something almost every reader had grown up watching. The character being killed was a character those readers had laughed at hundreds of times. The discomfort was personal in a way the haunted game stories stories never quite reached. The story spread fast. It got reposted to other forums. It got narrated on YouTube within months. The narration videos pulled millions of views. Other people started writing imitations. The format became known as the lost episode genre. Within 2 years of the original 2010 post, lost episode stories existed for The Simpsons, for SpongeBob, for Mickey Mouse, for Looney Tunes, for almost every major children's animation property in American history. Most of them were bad. A few of them were memorable. The format itself, though, had been set by Squidward's suicide. The story gave the genre its core grammar, the first-person narrator, the supposed insider, the hidden frames containing real photographs, the audio that sounds like it is coming through the speakers from somewhere else. The phrase hyper-realistic, which the original story used to describe the eyes, became one of the most overused words in internet horror writing for the next decade. People used it so often and so badly that it became a kind of joke. But every overuse traced back to the same source. Squidward's suicide had picked a specific phrase to describe something specific, and the phrase had spread. There were imitations. There were so many imitations that some of the major creepypasta wikis eventually had to ban new lost episode stories from being posted because the volume of low-quality copycat work was burying everything else. The original Squidward's suicide remained, for years, the most read story on those wikis. A second version appeared online a couple of years after the first. This one was called Red Mist. The Red Mist version is sometimes treated as a sequel to the original story, and sometimes as just an alternate retelling. It expands on the original with extra characters, including a fictional figure named Andrew Skinner, who is described as the murderer behind the photographs hidden in the episode. The Red Mist version is more polished in some ways, and is the version most non-fans have actually encountered, because it is the version that was most often posted on YouTube as a video reading. The story had another life as well. Independent animators began producing fake versions of the episode. They rendered scenes from the story in actual animation. They posted the videos online, sometimes with the title Red Mist, sometimes with the original title. A YouTuber who went by the name SpongeBob Red Mist, real name Chaz Agnew, became the most well-known of these animators. He produced a piece in 2011 he claimed was the original episode. It was not. It was a fan animation. It went viral anyway, repeatedly. Versions of it have been re-uploaded for over a decade. The strangest moment in the story's history happened on the actual show. In November 2019, SpongeBob aired an episode called SpongeBob in Random Land, episode 25 of season 12. Near the start of the episode, SpongeBob walks through a series of doors leading to alternate universe versions of the show's characters. One of those doors opens onto a brief shot of a character that is unmistakably designed to reference the lost episode Squidward. The character has the bleeding eyes. The character has the hyper-realistic stare. The original creepy scream from the most popular fan-animated version of Red Mist plays in the background. The cameo lasts only a few seconds. Fans noticed it within hours. The shot was widely interpreted as a wink at the most famous fan story ever written about the show. SpongeBob in Random Land became, briefly, one of the most discussed episodes of the season, almost entirely because of that one cameo. The cameo did not stay in the episode. According to the SpongeBob fan archives, airings of the episode after November 2019 quietly removed the Red Mist Squidward shot. The official episode that streams now does not contain it. The character is gone. The reference has been edited out. Why exactly is unclear. Nobody at the show or the network has officially commented. The most likely explanation is that the cameo was approved without enough thought about how it would land, and that someone in management decided, after seeing the response, that the show putting a visual reference to a story about Squidward shooting himself was not something they wanted on a children's network in long-term rotation. This is, in its own way, the strangest part of the whole story. A piece of fan fiction posted anonymously to a small message board in 2010 ended up referenced inside an official episode of the show in 2019. That reference was then removed. The fan story is now, in some sense, more permanent in the show's cultural memory than the official cameo that referenced it. The original 2010 post is still online. The author has, in interviews given under his Suicide Squidward handle in later years, said he is happy with how widely his story spread. He has acknowledged he wrote it after reading 2 earlier creepypastas, one called Dead Bart and one called SuicideMouse.avi. die and decided to write his own version with a different show. He has not shared his real name. The story he wrote in 2010 on a small board in a few hours has outlived almost everything else from that wave of internet writing. It is referenced in horror anthologies. It is taught in essays about the lost episode genre. It has been adapted, animated, parodied, and discussed for 16 years and counting. And the strangest part of all of it is that the story itself, the actual content, is not really that scary on a reread. The grammar is rough, the plot has holes. The atmosphere is built more on the idea of what the story is doing than on the writing itself. What made it spread was not the prose, it was the framing. The idea that somewhere a tape might exist that contains something children should not have seen. That the show, the cheerful yellow show that had been on television since 1999, might have a hidden corner. That somewhere in a vault, on a cassette nobody had labeled, the worst version of a beloved character was waiting. That feeling, the feeling that there might be a version of something familiar that you were not supposed to see, is what the story tapped into. The whole genre that came after it has been chasing the same feeling. None of those stories have ever quite caught it the way the original did. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. That feeling, the feeling that a beloved children's show might be hiding something the audience should not know, is also what powers the most accusatory fan theory about SpongeBob ever made. A theory not about lost tapes or radiation, but about the most popular menu item in all of cartoon history. A theory dark enough that the network had to publicly deny it. A theory the audience refused to stop believing, even after that denial. Section 7. Mr. Krabs is a cannibal. The Krabby Patty theory Nickelodeon had to officially debunk. In the summer of 2017, the official Nickelodeon Instagram account did something it had almost never done before. It commented publicly on a fan theory. The comment was short. It read that Krabby Patties are 100% not made of crabs. The post the comment appeared under was a meme. The meme was about a theory that had been bouncing around the internet for years, written down in scattered Reddit threads and Twitter posts, slowly building toward the moment when the network running SpongeBob SquarePants felt the need to step in and say something. The theory, in its simplest form, says that Mr. Krabs is a cannibal. The theory does not just say he is a cannibal in some abstract way. It says, specifically, that the secret formula for the Krabby Patty, the most famous food in cartoon history, the thing Plankton has been trying to steal for 2 decades of episodes, the thing that has driven the show's central conflict from the pilot to the present day, is crab meat. The theory says that Mr. Krabs has been making burgers out of his own kind for the entire run of the show, that he has been feeding those burgers to the citizens of Bikini Bottom, that he has been, in effect, running a cannibal operation in plain sight while everyone laughs and orders another patty. The case for the theory is built almost entirely on small details that the show itself has dropped, in passing, across hundreds of episodes. None of those details prove anything on their own. Stacked together, they make a case that is hard to fully shake off, even after the network has officially denied it. The first piece of evidence is the simplest. Look at the Krusty Krab menu. Almost every item on it is named after what it is made out of. There is a drink called the Kelp Shake, which is made of kelp. There is a snack called Coral Bits, which is made of coral. There is a beverage called Seafoam Soda. There is a side called Barnacle Loaf. The pattern is consistent. The food is named after the thing inside it. The thing inside the Krabby Patty, by that pattern, would be a crab. The second piece of evidence is geographic. Mr. Krabs has owned and operated the Krusty Krab for the entire run of the show, going back to before SpongeBob ever started working there. In all that time, across nearly 300 episodes, the show has shown almost no other crabs in Bikini Bottom. Mr. Krabs has a mother, who is also a crab, and who appears in a handful of episodes. There is a single episode called Krusty Crushers, where a few crabs from outside town show up briefly. Beyond that, the population of Bikini Bottom is fish, jellyfish, starfish, sea worms, and the occasional squirrel. The math, if you let yourself follow it, is uncomfortable. There used to be other crabs. There are not other crabs anymore. The crab who runs the burger restaurant has been there the whole time. The third piece of evidence is architectural. The Krusty Krab is built in a very specific shape. The exterior of the building looks, intentionally and unmistakably, like a crab trap. Real crab traps are wireframe cages used by fishermen to catch crabs alive. The shape is so specific that fans of the show have pointed it out for years as one of the show's small visual jokes. The building where crab meat is theoretically being processed is shaped like the device used in the real world to capture crabs. The fourth piece of evidence comes from the show itself, in a moment that is hard to read any other way once you have noticed it. In the episode Midlife Crustation, the same banned episode discussed earlier in this video, there is a scene where Mr. Krabs takes a bite of a Krabby Patty. After he chews and swallows, he says, in a tone of mild surprise, that this is what he tastes like. The line is delivered as a throwaway joke. It is voiced by Clancy Brown in a casual, almost confused way. The line is in the official script. It is in the original airing. It has never been edited out. Mr. Krabs, the owner of the restaurant that sells the Krabby Patty, took a bite of his own product and remarked on what his own flesh tastes like. The fifth piece of evidence, which fans have built into the theory more recently, has to do with Plankton. The entire series-long conflict of the show is that Plankton wants the Krabby Patty secret formula. He wants it badly enough to commit dozens of crimes across multiple seasons. He wants it badly enough that 2 of the SpongeBob movies are built around his attempts to get it. The show treats this as a pure business rivalry. Plankton has a failing restaurant called the Chum Bucket, located across the street from the Krusty Krab, and he wants the secret recipe so that his own restaurant can succeed. The theory reframes this. If the secret formula is crab meat, then Plankton's 25-year quest to expose it is not just a business move. It is, on some level, an attempt to expose a serial killer. Plankton, in this reading, has been the only character in Bikini Bottom who suspects the truth, and the only character with the motivation to bring it down. The show frames Plankton as the villain because the show is told from the perspective of the people who like Krabby Patties. From Plankton's side, he has been trying to expose a quiet underwater holocaust for the entire run of the cartoon. The sixth and final piece of evidence is harder to place, but worth mentioning. The Krabby Patty is, by every account in the show, addictive in a way that goes beyond normal food. The first time Squidward tries one, in the original Just One Bite, he gets so addicted he eats himself sick. There are multiple episodes built around the idea that customers cannot stop eating Krabby Patties, that they would riot if the supply was cut off, that the food is somehow chemically powerful in a way that ordinary fast food is not. The theory uses this as soft evidence that the recipe contains something the audience is not being told about. The theory traces its modern internet life to roughly 2017. A Reddit user posted the case in a thread on the SpongeBob subreddit. The post was short. It made the basic argument. It went viral within hours. From there it jumped to Twitter, then to BuzzFeed, then to FoodBeast, then to Bustle and Inquirer, and dozens of other outlets that picked the story up across that summer. By July 2017, the theory was loud enough that Nickelodeon, the network that owns the show, decided to step in. They did not put out a press release. They did not film a video. They commented on an Instagram post. The comment was made on a meme posted by an account called Daquan, which was at that time one of the largest meme accounts on Instagram. The comment came from the verified Nickelodeon account. The wording was short and direct. Krabby Patties are 100% not made of crabs. That comment was, for a network, an unusual move. Major media companies do not normally engage with fan theories about their own shows. They especially do not normally engage by posting public denials on meme accounts. The fact that Nickelodeon felt the need to respond at all tells you how loud the theory had become and how much they wanted it gone. Within days, every major entertainment news outlet was reporting on the denial. The story got bigger because of the denial than it had been before. The crab cannibal theory, which had been a fun internet reading, became national news because the network of the show had to step in and say it was not true. Steven Hillenburg, the show's creator, also weighed in. He confirmed, in interviews around that time, that the Krabby Patty contains no animal products at all. He said it is a veggie burger. The official position from the people who actually made the show, both the creator and the network, lined up. The Krabby Patty is plant-based. It is not crab. It is not anything else with a face. It is a vegetable patty. This should have ended the theory. It did not. Fans pushed back almost immediately. The most common pushback was simple. Why would Nickelodeon and Hillenburg need to deny it so publicly if there was nothing to deny? A network that confidently knew their show had a clean record would normally ignore an internet rumor. They would let it die on its own. The fact that they responded directly on a meme account with a verified comment looked to a lot of fans like an overcorrection, like the network protesting too much. The other pushback was about Midlife Crustation. The line where Mr. Krabs eats a Krabby Patty and remarks on what he tastes like is real. It is in the episode. The episode aired. The line was written, voiced, and approved. If the Krabby Patty is a veggie burger, fans argued, the line makes no sense. If the Krabby Patty is something other than crab, why would the writers have Mr. Krabs say that, even as a joke? The line, taken at face value, undercuts the official denial. There are good counter-arguments. The line in Midlife Crustation can be read as a non sequitur, the kind of weird throwaway gag the show does dozens of times an episode. SpongeBob is full of jokes that do not work as canon information. Characters have died in one episode and come back perfectly fine in the next. Backstories have been rewritten without warning. The continuity of the show is loose enough that fans should not be reading any single line as fixed truth. There is also the simple fact that Hillenburg, the show's creator, was a marine biologist before he was an animator. He had strong feelings about the ocean. He had strong feelings about how sea life was depicted in entertainment. The idea that he was secretly running a story about cannibalism for 20 years inside a children's show, while also publicly speaking and writing about marine conservation, is a hard fit. The official answer, that the Krabby Patty is just a veggie burger meant to be a fun mystery, lines up with the rest of his public work in a way the cannibal reading does not. But the theory has a power that fact checks cannot quite kill. The theory works because of how the show is structured. The mystery of what is in the Krabby Patty has been, by the show's own choice, the central running question of the series. Every episode about Plankton trying to steal the formula reinforces that there is something there to be stolen. Every episode where the formula is treated as a precious secret reinforces that the secret matters. The show has spent over 2 decades treating this single question as if the answer is enormous. The audience, naturally, expects the answer to be enormous. The answer of plant-based veggie patty is, narratively, a letdown. The crab meat reading, even as a joke, is a more satisfying ending to the long-running mystery the show itself set up. That is part of why the theory will not die. It fits the shape of the story the show has been telling. A small, weak, schemy enemy who has been trying for 20 years to expose his rival, in a town where that rival is the only crab left and runs a burger restaurant shaped like a crab trap, is a story arc that points toward the dark answer. The light answer, that the secret is some special combination of seasonings, is true but unsatisfying. The theory persists because the story needs it to. The denial from Nickelodeon, from Hillenburg, from every official source is on the record. The math of the show, the geography of the show, the shape of the building, the line in Midlife Crustation, the absence of other crabs, all of it is also on the record. Fans will keep choosing which set of evidence to believe. Most of them will keep choosing the dark version, even knowing that the official version is the official version. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The crab cannibal theory is one of the very few SpongeBob theories the network has had to publicly engage with. Most theories about the show, the network simply ignores. Some of them, though, the network has not just ignored. They have actively, through interviews and panel comments and quiet on-camera moments, almost confirmed. One of those theories ties 7 main characters of the show, with surprising precision, to 7 specific moral failings written down in religious texts thousands of years older than animation itself. Section 8, The 7 Deadly Sins, the theory the showrunner half confirmed. There are 7 main characters in SpongeBob SquarePants. The show has run for over 2 decades, produced hundreds of episodes, introduced dozens of side characters and one-time guests, but the core has stayed the same. SpongeBob, Patrick, Squidward, Sandy, Mr. Krabs, Plankton, Gary. 7. The number is not a coincidence to fans of the theory that has followed the show around since its earliest seasons. 7 main characters, the theory says, and 7 deadly sins, 1 for each. The 7 deadly sins are not invented. They come from old Christian moral teachings, written down in religious texts going back over 1,000 years. They are listed as sloth, gluttony, pride, lust, greed, envy, and wrath. They are meant to describe 7 different ways a human being can fall apart morally. 7 different bad pulls inside a person that a virtuous life is supposed to resist. They appear in religious paintings, in poetry, in literature. Dante used them in the Divine Comedy. Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman dealt with them in the movie Seven. They have been part of cultural memory for so long that almost everyone has heard of them, even people who would not be able to explain where they came from. The fan theory says SpongeBob's main cast lines up with the 7 deadly sins. Each character represents one. The matchup, once you see it, is the kind of pattern that is is hard to unsee. Patrick's star is sloth. Sloth is the sin of laziness, of refusing to do anything, of letting your life slide because you cannot summon the will to act on it. Patrick lives under a literal rock. He sleeps for entire episodes at a time. In an episode called Big Pink Loser, he wins an award specifically for doing absolutely nothing for the longest period of time. His speech is slow. His thoughts are slower. He has, across the entire run of the show, demonstrated an active commitment to doing as little as possible with his life. The match is so direct that even casual viewers tend to nod when it gets pointed out. If you wanted to make a children's show that put a face on sloth, the face would be Patrick. Mr. Krabs is greed. Greed is the sin of loving money more than people, of letting wealth become more important than every other thing. Mr. Krabs is the most consistent character in SpongeBob's writing. Across hundreds of episodes, his single defining feature is his obsession with money. He underpays SpongeBob and Squidward. He charges his customers for every possible thing he can find to charge them for. He has multiple episodes where his greed leads to the active endangerment of the people around him. In one famous episode called Born Again Krabs, he literally chooses a single penny over the safety of his employee. There is no character in animation history who is more clearly the face of greed. Mr. Krabs is the textbook. Plankton is envy. Envy is the sin of wanting what someone else has so badly that it consumes you, of measuring your own life against another person's success and tearing yourself apart over the gap. Plankton's entire existence is structured around envy. He runs a failing restaurant directly across the street from a successful one. He spends every waking moment trying to steal the formula that he believes would give him the success Mr. Krabs has. Even when episodes give him moments of victory, he is unable to feel them. In an episode called The Algae's Always Greener, the show literally swaps Plankton's life with Mr. Krabs' life, lets him have everything he claims to want, and Plankton still cannot be happy. He is the perfect literary version of envy. The wanting is the wound. Squidward is wrath. Wrath is the sin of uncontrolled anger, of rage that consumes you and makes you cruel to the people around you. Squidward, on the surface, is sometimes mistaken for a different sin. Some readings put him as pride or even sloth. The closest fit, though, is wrath. Squidward's animosity toward SpongeBob is constant. His meanness toward customers is constant. In the episode Dying for Pie, his irritation with SpongeBob leads him to a chain of decisions that almost results in SpongeBob's death. In multiple episodes, his moments of triumph are not about achieving something good. They are about watching someone he hates suffer. The Christmas special, where Squidward takes pleasure in SpongeBob's holiday being ruined, is one of the cleanest examples in the show of pure, undiluted wrath in a children's character. Sandy is pride. Pride is the sin of thinking too much of yourself, of placing your own intelligence and worth above everyone else's. Sandy is, by any measure, the smartest character in Bikini Bottom. She is a scientist. She is constantly inventing things. She also constantly reminds everyone that she is from Texas, that mammals are better than fish, that her brain works differently and better than the brains around her. In the episode Texas, she gets visibly furious when she feels her home state has been disrespected. In the episode Squirrel Jokes, the same dynamic plays out around her species. In the episode Pressure, she physically tries to prove that land creatures are superior to sea creatures. Pride is not a flaw that destroys Sandy the way wrath destroys Squidward. It is, instead, a quiet, fixed feature. She always thinks she is the smartest person in the room, and the show generally agrees with her, which is part of what makes the pride reading work. Gary is gluttony. Gluttony is the sin of eating too much, of indulging in physical appetites past the point of need. Gary is a snail, and snails do not have a lot of personality to work with. But the show has built a recurring joke for over 20 years around Gary's hunger. SpongeBob's defining responsibility, almost his catchphrase, is that he has to remember to feed Gary. The episode, Have You Seen This Snail?, is built entirely around Gary running away because SpongeBob forgot to feed him. In a deeper episode, where SpongeBob enters Gary's dream, the snail is shown to have hidden depth, even royal heritage. But the surface trait that the show has spent decades reinforcing is that Gary is always hungry. The match to gluttony is a softer match than the others, but it fits. That leaves SpongeBob himself, lust. This is the assignment that has caused the most confusion among fans of the theory. Lust, in modern English, is most commonly used to mean strong sexual desire. SpongeBob, who is by all signs a child-coded character living a child-coded life, does not fit that reading. The original meaning of the word, though, is old older and broader. Lust, in its older religious sense, means an intense, almost desperate desire for something. It can mean desire for food, or success, or love, or experience. The dictionary definition, which Merriam-Webster still includes, lists eagerness and enthusiasm as part of the word's meaning. Read that way, SpongeBob fits. He is the most enthusiastic character in animation history. He wants to fry burgers more than anything. He wants to be everyone's friend. He wants to catch jellyfish, drive a boat, win karate championships, please his boss, please his neighbors, please everyone he meets. His want is the loudest thing about him. The desire is constant. It does not stop. The intensity of it, when looked at coldly, can read as a kind of mania. SpongeBob's lust is a lust for life, for experience, for connection, for purpose. It powers the entire show. The case for the theory is strong. The case is not the same as official confirmation, though, and for years, there was no official confirmation. The theory lived on Reddit, on TikTok, on YouTube, in fan forums, and articles that came back to it every few years. Steven Hillenburg, the show's creator, never publicly addressed it. He passed away in 2018 without ever, on the record, agreeing or disagreeing with the 7 Deadly Sins reading. That changed in late 2024. The same Esquire reunion video that gave us the confirmation of the nuclear theory included a separate moment where the cast and crew addressed the 7 Sins theory directly. Mr. Lawrence, the longtime writer and the voice of Plankton, was the one who responded. He chose his words carefully. His exact wording was that the idea was, in his words, like the 7 Deadly Sins. He compared the structure of the show to the structure of the show Gilligan's Island, where each character represents a specific archetype. He said that each main SpongeBob character represents a specific kind of thing, but he qualified the comparison. He said it was not as tangible as saying SpongeBob is lust, or that Mr. Krabs is greed in some literal way. This is, in television writer language, a soft yes. He did not deny it. He did not push back on the reading. He said the basic idea, that each character was designed to represent one specific thing, was correct. He just declined to lock the matchup to the specific list of sins. Within the same conversation, his co-star Roger Bumpus agreed that the Patrick Sloth and Mr. Krabs greed pairings looked obvious to him. The other pairings he was less sure about. Tom Kenny, who voices SpongeBob himself, joked that his character would, if he were lust, simply lust after working more shifts at the Krusty Krab. He played the question for laughs. What the cast and writer actually said, taken seriously, lines up with the theory in a soft way. The show was built with the intention that each of the 7 main characters would embody a single trait. The traits the writers had in mind may not be exactly the 7 sins from the medieval Christian list. The structure of one character per trait, though, was real. The structure was used. Lawrence confirmed that. Some pairings are stronger than others. Mr. Krabs as greed is, by Lawrence and Bumpus and basically everyone else who has ever spoken about the character, a clean fit. Patrick as sloth is a clean fit. Plankton as envy fits, although Lawrence noted that Plankton's pride and his anger also fit the character, which means the assignment is not exclusive. Squidward as wrath fits, although his pride and his self-pity could push him into other categories. The fits that have caused the most argument are SpongeBob as lust and Sandy as pride. SpongeBob as lust depends on accepting the older, broader meaning of the word. Sandy as pride is well supported by specific episodes, but requires a generous reading. The two assignments work, but they are the assignments fans argue about most. There is one detail that gives the theory more weight than it might otherwise have. The earliest discussion of the 7 Deadly Sins reading in fan circles traces back to comments allegedly made by Mr. Lawrence himself in audio commentaries on the Season 1 DVDs. Several fan posts, going back over a decade, reference these commentaries as the original source of the theory. If those references are accurate, then Lawrence had been hinting at the structure of the cast for a very long time before the 2024 Esquire interview, and his recent comments are not a new revelation, but a confirmation of something he had been saying quietly for years. The theory works, fundamentally, because the characters are clean. SpongeBob is one of the most tightly written casts in cartoon history. Each character has a small set of defining traits, and almost never strays from them. That kind of consistent character design, where each major figure represents a distinct, fixed thing, is exactly the structure the 7 Deadly Sins reading depends on. The reason the theory feels true is because the show was, by Lawrence's own admission, built with that kind of structure in mind. The specific list of traits may not be the medieval one. The principle that each character is one specific thing, and only that thing, thing is real. The theory says something deeper, though. It says that a children's show, watched by millions of kids who never read the medieval moral writings the sins came from, has been quietly teaching that list of failings for over 2 decades. Every kid who watched SpongeBob spent thousands of hours studying what greed looks like, what envy looks like, what wrath looks like. They were watching cartoon versions of the 7 oldest moral warnings in Western culture. They learned the shape of those warnings before they learned the names of them. By the time they were old enough to read about pride or sloth in a religious or literary context, the shape was already inside them. That is the kind of effect a long-running children's show can have without anyone in the audience noticing. The structure of the cast does the teaching. The names of the lessons come later, if they come at all. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The 7 sins theory is, in the end, about the 7 characters being 7 different patterns of failure. There is, however, an entirely different theory that uses the same 7 characters and reads them through a completely different lens. A lens that does not come from religion or moral teaching at all. A lens that became one of the biggest viral conversations the show ever produced, rolled out in a TikTok video that hit 30 million views in a matter of days, and that one of the show's lead actors went out of his way to confirm in front of a crowd at a comic book convention in 2024. Section 9. The mental illness theory, and what Tom Kenny actually said. In the opening days of January 2023, a TikTok user posting under the handle Ashley Spam uploaded a short video. The video was about SpongeBob SquarePants. The text overlaid on the screen said it had taken her 10 years to realize that the SpongeBob characters represent mental disorders. She listed her readings one by one. SpongeBob represents ADHD. Squidward represents depression. Patrick has Down syndrome. Mr. Krabs has narcissistic personality disorder. Plankton has bipolar disorder. The video was short. The delivery was casual. She called herself a conspiracy theorist as a joke. Within days, the video had 30 million views. The comments section filled up with people saying their childhoods were ruined. Other users posted reaction videos. News outlets picked it up. The Jerusalem Post wrote about it. Sportskeeda wrote about it. Major British tabloids ran the story. Within a week, Ashley Spam had posted a follow-up video, adding the rest of the cast. Mrs. Puff has post-traumatic stress disorder, brought on by SpongeBob's repeated boating disasters. Sandy has anxiety. Pearl has bipolar disorder. Gary, she said, was just fine. The follow-up video also went viral. Combined, the 2 videos reached tens of millions of viewers. The theory, which had been discussed in smaller fan circles online for at least a decade before that, became one of the most shared SpongeBob conversations in the show's entire run. The theory has roots going back well before the TikTok video. Fan forums and Reddit threads had been making versions of the same readings since at least the early 2000s. The Encyclopedia SpongeBobia, the largest SpongeBob fan wiki, hosts old discussion threads where users have been mapping characters to disorders for years. Some of those mappings overlap with Ashley Spam's list. Others are different. The general framework, that each character's defining traits read as recognizable symptoms of recognizable conditions, is older than the TikTok wave. The TikTok video is what brought the theory to a mass audience. The case for each character, taken individually, has some real weight to it. SpongeBob's reading as ADHD comes from his behavior across hundreds of episodes. He cannot sit still. His attention jumps from one thing to another at high speed. He gets fixated on small tasks, like flipping the perfect Krabby Patty, with an intensity that crowds everything else out. He talks fast. He moves fast. His emotional reactions are large and immediate. The behavior pattern fits one of the recognized presentations of ADHD, the hyperactive type, in a way that does not require much stretching. Patrick's reading is more controversial. The TikTok video says Patrick represents Down syndrome. This reading is older than the video and has been argued in fan spaces for years, but it has also been criticized as harmful. Down syndrome is a specific genetic condition that affects real people and real families. Reading a cartoon starfish whose defining traits are extreme stupidity and laziness as a representation of Down syndrome can land badly, especially when the character is regularly the butt of jokes about his intelligence. Many disability advocates have pushed back on this reading specifically. The more careful version of the reading describes Patrick as showing signs of intellectual disability in a general sense, without tying it to a specific condition. Squidward's reading as depression is the strongest fit on the list. He is unhappy in nearly every episode. He cannot remember happy moments from his life. He spends most of his time alone. He takes no pleasure in activities he says he loves. loves, like clarinet playing and painting. He sees his life as a meaningless dead-end job in a town full of people he hates. The Are You Happy Now episode, discussed earlier in this video, is essentially a depression case study with a SpongeBob coat of paint over it. Squidward as depression is the reading the show itself almost confirms by accident, episode after episode, year after year. Mr. Krabs as narcissistic personality disorder is a stretch in some ways and a clean fit in others. The greed is established. The lack of empathy for his employees is established. The willingness to use other people as tools for his own gain is established. The reading where he is a clinical narcissist depends on framing those traits as symptoms rather than as comedic exaggerations. Reasonable fans can split on it. Plankton's reading as bipolar disorder is the loosest of the major assignments. Plankton's mood swings are real. He has manic phases where he believes he is about to take over Bikini Bottom. He has crashes where he believes everything is hopeless. The pattern, mapped onto bipolar disorder, has some surface fit. The case is less direct than Squidward's depression, but the reading is not impossible to defend. Mrs. Puff as post-traumatic stress disorder is, in some ways, the funniest fit on the list, because the show itself almost writes the condition outright. Mrs. Puff is a boating school teacher whose star pupil, SpongeBob, has put her in a hospital, in a jail cell, and in life-threatening danger across dozens of episodes. The character was traumatized by her job. She has visible flinch responses to seeing SpongeBob. She has nightmares. She has tried to escape the situation more than once. The PTSD reading is barely a reading. It is almost a description. Sandy as anxiety and Pearl as bipolar disorder are softer fits, but each has supporting evidence. Sandy has clear stress responses, especially around protecting her air supply and her home. Pearl, as a teenager, has the kind of mood swing behavior that the show plays for laughs, but that, taken seriously, lines up with what bipolar episodes can look like. Gary the Snail, the one character on the list Ashley Spam said was fine, has actually been argued in deeper fan circles to have his own pile of conditions, including possible signs of intelligence and emotional depth that the show only occasionally shows. The casual reading, that Gary is just a happy snail, is probably the closest to true. The reading the show went out of its way to confirm came in 2024. Tom Kenny, the voice of SpongeBob since the very first episode, was at the Motor City Comic Con in Michigan in May 2024. He was there as a guest. He was talking to fans. During his panel, the topic of SpongeBob's mental state came up. The question in some form was whether SpongeBob is autistic. Tom Kenny answered directly. His exact response, picked up by the New York Post and several entertainment outlets, was that of course SpongeBob is autistic. He went further. He said that autism is, for SpongeBob, his superpower. The phrasing was clear. The character SpongeBob, the lead of the show, is, according to the actor who voices him, on the autism spectrum. The actor said it on camera, at a public event, with no qualification. This is, in some ways, even more direct than the 7 Deadly Sins confirmation from Mr. Lawrence. Lawrence said the structure of the cast was correct, but declined to lock the specific assignments. Tom Kenny named the assignment. SpongeBob is autistic. Full stop. The reading, once Kenny said it, became hard to shake off. Autism, like ADHD, has presentations. Some of those presentations include intense focus on specific interests, like SpongeBob's obsession with cooking and jellyfish. Some of them include literal interpretation of language, which SpongeBob does constantly. Some include a difficulty reading social cues, which SpongeBob also does. The reading also explains some behaviors that the older ADHD reading does not quite capture, like SpongeBob's deep loyalty to specific routines and his tendency to take other characters' words at face value. Tom Kenny may not have had the medical depth to defend the reading academically. He had, however, been voicing the character for over 25 years. His sense of who SpongeBob is comes from inside the character. The TikTok-era theory has a problem the older fan readings did not have, which is that diagnosing fictional characters with real disorders can do real-world damage. Articles in outlets like Screen Rant pushed back on the theory after it went viral, pointing out that simplifying a complex condition like ADHD down to one cartoon character risks teaching audiences that the character's hyperactive presentation is what ADHD always looks like. Inattentive ADHD, which is more internal and quieter, exists too. People with the inattentive type already have a harder time getting diagnosed because their symptoms are less visible. A viral, cartoon-based version of the disorder that only shows the loud version makes the less loud version harder to recognize. recognize. The same problem applies, in stronger form, to the Patrick as Down syndrome reading. The reading takes a real condition and maps it onto a character whose role in the show is to be slow and frequently humiliated. Even if no one involved in the show ever intended that mapping, the reading itself has the effect of teaching audiences to associate Down syndrome with a specific cartoon presentation. That effect is not neutral. The theory holds in some carefully limited form. Tom Kenny has confirmed the autism reading for SpongeBob himself. The Squidward depression reading is hard to dispute given the actual content of the show. The Mrs. Puff PTSD reading is almost canon. The other readings are softer, defensible at best, harmful at worst. The whole theory, taken as a single neat package, is more wrong than right. Taking character by character, with care, parts of it are real. What the theory does best is something larger than its individual claims. It takes a show that everyone watched as a kid and lets them go back as adults and see the shapes of the lives they would later live drawn into the cartoon. The kid who watched Squidward and laughed grows into the adult who recognizes what they were watching. The kid who watched SpongeBob's relentless cheerfulness and wanted to be like him grows into the adult who understands that the cheerfulness is, sometimes, a coping strategy. The theory is, in some ways, a way of rereading childhood. The cartoon stays the same. The viewer changes. The viewer brings new vocabulary back to the cartoon. The cartoon, holding still, lets itself be reread. Tom Kenny's autism comment opened a door the show had kept half closed for 2.5 decades. SpongeBob's behavior, all of it, can now be read through that lens. The door, once opened, does not close again. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. There is one more SpongeBob reading worth ending on. A reading not about how the characters' minds work, but about the family at the center of the show. The crab, his daughter, and the question the show's creator refused to answer for his entire life. Section 10. The Pearl Theory. How a crab has a whale for a daughter, and why Hillenburg refused to answer. Pearl Krabs is a whale. Eugene Krabs, her father, is a crab. The show has never explained how this works. For nearly 3 decades, fans have been waiting for an answer. The waiting has been a quiet thing across hundreds of episodes. Pearl shows up, towers over her father, throws a teenage tantrum about something, and the episode moves on. The show treats her enormous size and her wrong species as a running visual gag. Pearl, the size of a small building, leaning down to talk to her tiny crab father, is funny on its own. The show does not ask viewers to think about the deeper question. The show just lets the joke be the joke. But the question is there. It has always been there. And the longer the show ran without answering it, the more fans started building their own answer. The most popular fan answer, the one that has spread across Reddit threads and YouTube videos and theory articles for over a decade, is dark. It is also, of all the major SpongeBob fan theories, probably the most emotionally heavy. The theory goes like this. Pearl is not Mr. Krabs' biological daughter. Pearl was found, as a baby, lying next to the body of her dying mother, who had been killed by surface fishermen using fishing equipment from the human world above. Mr. Krabs found her. He could not save her mother. He did the only thing he could do. He took the baby home and raised her as his own. The theory was popularized by a writer named John Negroni, who is best known for putting together the Pixar theory, a fan reading that connected every Pixar movie into a single shared timeline. Negroni applied the same kind of close attention to SpongeBob and noticed several details that, taken together, build a strong case for the rescued Pearl reading. The first detail is Mr. Krabs' fear of fishhooks. In the Season 2 episode Hooky, the entire plot is built around Mr. Krabs warning SpongeBob and Patrick to stay away from the fishhooks that have started appearing in Bikini Bottom. He is not just cautious, he is shaken. He tells them stories about sea creatures who get caught by hooks and end up packed in cans or sold in gift shops. His fear is intense in a way that does not match the rest of his character. Mr. Krabs is, in every other episode, fearless when it comes to physical danger. He has fought monsters. He has stared down armed pirates. He has dived into garbage disposals over a single dime. The one thing that genuinely scares him is the equipment used by humans to pull living things out of the ocean. That fear, the theory says, has a source. The fear is not abstract. The fear is personal. The fear of fishhooks in this reading comes from watching what fishhooks did to someone he loved. The second detail is Mr. Krabs' behavior with money. He is, as established earlier in this video, possibly the greediest character in the history of children's television. He fights over single coins. He underpays his employees. He charges customers for breathing. The exception to all of this is Pearl. Mr. Krabs gives Pearl money. He buys her things. He lets her go to the mall. He spoils her in ways that do not match anything else about how he treats his bank account. The character who would not part with a penny for a friend will hand his daughter a wallet full of cash and not blink. The theory says this is because she is the one thing in his life he could actually save. The money is, in some way, an apology to her mother. He could not protect Pearl's mother from the surface. He can give Pearl everything else. The third detail is her name, Pearl. The name is, on the surface, a play on the phrase mother of pearl, which Mr. Krabs uses as an exclamation across the show. The deeper reading is that the name is more literal. The name is a small monument. Pearl was named to remember the mother who could not stay. The naming makes more sense if it carries that kind of weight than if it is just wordplay. The theory has been popular for so long that it sometimes gets mistaken for canon. It is not canon. The actual canon, taken from the show's own production materials, is more complicated and in some ways less satisfying. In the year 2000, an official trivia book about the show was published, written by a former SpongeBob writer named David Fain. The book contains a line where Mr. Krabs explains that Pearl is a whale because she takes after her mother that way. According to the book, Pearl's mother is a whale named Mrs. Krabs. Mrs. Krabs is, by the trivia book's account, Mr. Krabs' wife and Pearl's biological mother. She is also, according to the book, a whale. That is the official answer. Pearl is biologically the daughter of a whale mother. That is why she is a whale. The crab father and the whale mother had a daughter together, and the daughter took after the mother's species. The book's logic is that simple. Several details from the show line up with this. A 2008 section in British Nickelodeon magazines called Briny Buddies asked young readers to design what they thought Mrs. Krabs might look like. The winning designs were printed in later issues. The character was treated, in those magazines, as a real but unseen part of the family. Mr. Krabs' official character fact sheet has, at various points, listed Mrs. Krabs as a member of his family. The biological mother exists in the show's larger world, even if she has never appeared on screen. That last part is the strange part. The mother exists in supporting material. She does not exist in the show. She has never been seen. She has never been heard. She has never been named in dialogue, only in a side trivia book and a magazine contest. The reason is Stephen Hillenburg. According to Vincent Waller, the show's longtime creative director, Hillenburg was repeatedly asked over the years to do an episode about Pearl's origin. Fans wrote in, letters arrived, people wanted to know. Waller has said publicly that Hillenburg received many of these requests and was very much against ever solving the mystery of how Pearl became Mr. Krabs' daughter on the show itself. A plot outline was actually written. During season 5, the production team worked on what was going to be a special, longer than usual episode revealing Pearl's origin and the identity of her mother. The outline existed. Early development work was done. Then the project was shelved by Hillenburg himself. According to Waller, the episode will never be finished. Hillenburg's disapproval of the concept was firm enough that, even after his passing in 2018, the production has not gone back to it. The story of how Pearl got her father has been kept off the screen on purpose. The shelved outline sits, unfinished, somewhere in the show's production records. This is a meaningful creative choice. Hillenburg, by all accounts, knew the answer he wanted. He just refused to tell it to the audience. He wanted Pearl's family to be a question the show carried without answering. He wanted the joke of a crab father and a whale daughter to stay a joke instead of becoming a backstory. He wanted the audience to feel the weight of not knowing instead of the weight of knowing. The fan theory and the canon answer are, in some ways, telling the same story from different angles. The canon says Mrs. Krabs exists, was Mr. Krabs' wife, was a whale, and is now gone for reasons the show never explains. The fan theory says she was killed by surface fishermen, and that Mr. Krabs raised the baby alone. The two readings agree that there was a mother. They agree that she is no longer in the picture. They agree that Mr. Krabs is a single father raising a daughter whose biological history is real but unspoken. The only thing they disagree on is the cause. The canon version is silent about how the mother left. The fan version fills in the silence with hooks. What both versions share is the more important point. Mr. Krabs, the greediest, most money-obsessed character in cartoon history, is, when you look at his actual behavior, a single father raising a teenage daughter alone, doing it imperfectly, but doing it anyway. day, in a town where he has no other family except his own elderly mother. The character the show plays for laughs every week is, underneath, one of the most quietly tragic figures in the cast. The show's choice not to explain is what gives the theory its power. Hillenburg understood that some questions are stronger when they are not answered. A mystery that gets solved becomes a fact. A mystery that stays open becomes something the audience carries with them. Every time a viewer watches Pearl tower over her father, every time they hear him call her his sweet little angel, every time they see him hand her a pile of cash he would never have given to anyone else, the unanswered question is sitting underneath the scene. Hillenburg passed away in November 2018 after a long battle with a disease that took his ability to work toward the end. He took the full answer with him. The episode that would have explained Pearl's mother will never be made. The Mrs. Krabs design contest entries from the British magazines are the closest the world will ever get to seeing her. The empty chair at the Krabs family table will stay empty. That is the choice of the man who built the world. And that, in the end, is the thread that runs through every story in this video. The Panty Raid episode pulled from rotation in 2018 with no announcement. The pandemic episode held back for 2 years and quietly released on a normal Friday in 2022. The gasoline scene cut after September 11th and never restored. The 3 episodes about depression and suicide and animal cruelty that the network has never said a word about, even after 14 years of fan complaints. The radiation theory the writer Mr. Lawrence finally confirmed on camera in 2024. The lost episode story posted to a small message board in 2010 that grew into an entire genre of internet horror. The crab cannibal theory the network had to publicly deny in a comment on a meme account. The 7 sins hidden in the cast. The autism a lead actor finally named at a comic book convention. The whale daughter raised by the crab father whose mother will never appear on screen. Every one of those stories is, in some way, about a choice the show or the network or the fans made about what to show and what to hide. The show is one of the most watched, most loved, most quoted children's programs in the history of the medium. It is also, at the edges, a show with cuts and silences and shelved outlines and characters who never got their backstories. The cheerfulness on the surface is real, so is the dark stuff underneath. Both are part of what made the show last. The kids who grew up with SpongeBob in the late 1990s and early 2000s are adults now. They are old enough to read the deleted scenes, to hear the writer's confirmations, to watch the lost episode creepypastas that scared their friends in middle school, and to recognize themselves in the characters they once just laughed at. The Squidward who could not remember a happy memory makes more sense now than he did then. The Mr. Krabs who never lets himself rest makes more sense. The SpongeBob who refuses to stop being cheerful, no matter what the world throws at him, makes the most sense of all. A children's show this big does not stay this loved by accident. The show was made by people who understood that the goofy cartoon on the surface had to be built on something real underneath, and they let pieces of the real thing show through, sometimes on purpose, sometimes by accident, sometimes only after the network had to step in and pull an episode, or comment on a meme, or quietly cut a scene and hope nobody remembered. People remembered. People are still remembering. 26 years after the first episode aired, the conversations about what the show is, what it meant, and what it never quite said are still happening. The cheerful yellow sponge is still on the air. The empty chair at the Krabs family table is still empty. The panty raid is still gone. The gasoline scene is still cut. The lost episode never existed. The radiation is real. That is SpongeBob, the cartoon and everything around it. The show that aired and the show that did not. The brightness and the dark behind it. Both of them together are what made it last. If you enjoyed this video essay, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.